My best friend kicked me from our vacation group chat, claiming I was too broke to join them. She and our friends laughed about it, unaware that my job was about to put me in the same resort, in the penthouse suite they could only dream of. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The digital guillotine fell without a sound. One moment, I was part of a vibrant, emoji-filled group chat named Belize Babes. The next, I was staring at a blank screen with the curt, system-generated message, "You have been removed from the group." My phone felt unnaturally cold in my hand, a small, black mirror reflecting my own stunned face. The silence in my home office was suddenly immense, broken only by the frantic hum of my laptop's fan. I had been hunched over my desk for 10 hours straight, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the mounting anxiety of a client payment that was now 4 days overdue. It was a significant sum from a new, slightly disorganized tech startup, and its delay had thrown my meticulously planned monthly budget into a state of temporary chaos. It was just a cash flow hiccup, a normal part of freelance life, but it had come at the worst possible time. The Belize trip had been Chloe's brainchild. For 10 years, since we were college roommates, our little group, Chloe, Mark, Jessica, and I, had been inseparable. Chloe, with her flair for the dramatic and her impeccable taste, had declared that for our collective 30th birthdays next year, we were going to do something truly epic. She'd found an exclusive island resort, a place with overwater bungalows and turquoise waters that looked photoshopped. The price tag was steep, but she'd insisted it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. "We have to do it," she'd typed in the chat, followed by a dozen star emojis. "We deserve it." The non-refundable deposit, $500 per person, was due today. I'd seen the reminder pop up that morning and had felt a familiar pang of stress. With my main project payment delayed, my checking account was leaner than I was comfortable with. It wasn't that I didn't have the money. It was tied up in savings and investments that were foolish to touch for a vacation deposit. The smart, responsible thing to do was wait. So I had sent a private message, not to the whole group, but to Chloe, my best friend of a decade. "Hey, super excited for the trip. Quick heads up, my big client payment is a few days late. Is it okay if I send the deposit on Friday when it clears? I don't want to hold anything up." I'd expected a quick, "No worries, B," or "Of course, just let me know." What I got was radio silence. For 2 hours, my message sat there, marked as read. I tried to push down the unease twisting in my gut, telling myself she was just busy. Chloe was a social media manager for a fashion brand. Her days were a whirlwind of meetings and photo shoots. But then, the group chat, which had been quiet all day, exploded with notifications. I glanced over. It was a screenshot. My heart plummeted. Chloe had screenshotted my private message and posted it for everyone to see. "Guys, I think we need to talk about this," her message read. "I don't want to be mean, but if Brenda is already struggling with the deposit, how is she going to afford the rest of the trip? The flights, the food, the excursions, it's a lot. I just don't want to have to worry about someone not being able to keep up. It kind of ruins the whole vibe, you know." My fingers trembled as I read the replies. Mark, "Oof, yeah, good point. That would be awkward." Jessica, "Totally. We need everyone to be on the same page financially. It's supposed to be a stress-free trip." My face burned with a humiliation so hot it felt like a fever. She had taken my private, responsible request and twisted it into a public spectacle of my supposed financial failure. She had painted me as a liability, a charity case who would drag down their perfect, Instagrammable vacation. I started to type a furious response, my thumbs flying across the screen. "Chloe, what is this? I just asked for a few days. The money is coming in, this is completely out of line." But before I could hit send, the screen went blank. "You have been removed from the group." They hadn't even given me a chance to defend myself. Chloe, my maid of honor, the woman who held my hair back in college and cried with me when my first business venture failed, had publicly shamed me and then silenced me. The speed and clinical precision of the act were what hurt the most. It wasn't a heated argument that spiraled out of control, it was a calculated execution. I stared at my laptop, at the rows of financial projections and marketing analytics I had been meticulously crafting. I was good at my job. I had built a successful consultancy from nothing, advising some of the biggest names in the luxury hospitality industry. I wasn't broke. I was just temporarily illiquid, and for that, I had been deemed unworthy. The pain was a physical thing, a sharp, jagged stone in my chest. This wasn't just about a vacation. It was about a decade of friendship, of shared secrets and unwavering support, all apparently conditional on my ability to produce $500 on demand. The betrayal was worse than any financial struggle could ever be. The hours after my digital excommunication were a blur of hollow shock. I closed my laptop, the unfinished client presentation seeming utterly pointless. The vibrant colors of a mock-up for a new hotel website felt garish and offensive. How could I focus on crafting taglines about unforgettable experiences and luxurious escapes when my own escape had been so cruelly snatched away? My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm productivity, felt like a cage. Every corner held a memory now tainted by Chloe's actions. The framed photo on my bookshelf of the four of us, grinning on a beach in Mexico 5 years ago, seemed to mock me. Had she been secretly judging me then, too? The expensive bottle of wine on my counter, a gift from Jessica for my last birthday, now felt like a prop from a life that was no longer mine. My thumb hovered over Chloe's contact information. I could call her. I could demand an explanation, scream at her, cry, anything to make her understand the depth of her cruelty. But what was the point? She hadn't wanted a conversation, she'd wanted an execution. A phone call would only give her the satisfaction of hearing my pain. My phone buzzed. A single text from Chloe. Not an apology, not an explanation, but a justification disguised as pity. "Hey, I know you're probably upset," it began, the casual tone making my blood run cold. "But it was for the best. It would have been so stressful for you, and we just want to relax. No hard feelings, okay? We'll do a cheap brunch or something when we get back." No hard feelings. The 3 words were a masterpiece of passive-aggressive dismissal. She was absolving herself of all guilt, reframing her viciousness as a favor to me. A cheap brunch. The condescension was breathtaking. She was demoting me from a friend worthy of a luxury vacation to a charity case who could be placated with Eggs Benedict. I typed and deleted a dozen scathing replies before settling on a cold, simple question. "Why didn't you just talk to me, Chloe?" The 3 dots appeared instantly. She was ready for this. There was nothing to talk about, Bren. The group made a decision. It's done. The group made a decision. She was hiding behind the others, a tactic she'd perfected over the years. She would plant an idea, nurture it with gossip and feigned concern, and then present the outcome as a democratic consensus, absolving herself of her role as the architect of the drama. I felt a wave of icy clarity wash over me, extinguishing the fire of my anger and leaving something much harder in its place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of social pruning. For whatever reason, Chloe had decided I no longer fit the image of the life she was curating for herself, and she had severed me from the group with surgical precision. Mark and Jessica were just collateral damage, too weak-willed to stand up to her. My pain began to morph into a quiet, steely resolve. I would not beg for their approval. I would not let them see me crumble. I took a deep breath, muted the chat with Chloe, and then muted every notification from my social media apps. I didn't need to see their excited posts, the countdowns, the packing photos. I didn't need any more reminders of what I had lost, or rather, what had been taken. I turned back to my laptop and reopened the presentation. The work, which had seemed meaningless moments before, now felt like a lifeline. It was mine. It was something I had built, something that depended on my skill and my intellect, not my popularity or my immediate cash flow. I poured all my wounded energy into the slides, refining every detail, strengthening every argument. Work was my fortress now. As I proofread the final slide, a thought surfaced, clear, and sharp. They saw me as weak, as someone struggling. They had reduced my entire identity to a single, temporary bank balance. They thought they knew my life, my career, my capabilities. But they had forgotten one crucial thing about me. They had forgotten what I did for a living. My friendship with Chloe was a creature of habit, forged in the fires of late-night study sessions and cheap pizza. We met as freshmen, two ambitious girls from small towns trying to make our mark in the big city. I was the quiet, focused one. She was the effervescent social butterfly who could charm her way into any party and talk her way out of any trouble. We were a perfect pair, my steady diligence balancing her chaotic energy. Over the years, I became her anchor. I was the one who proofread her essays, who drove her to the airport at 5 a.m., who lent her money for rent in our first apartment when her paycheck was late, never once asking when I'd get it back. When she went through a brutal breakup, it was my couch she slept on for 2 weeks and my freezer she emptied of ice cream. I did it without a second thought because that's what best friends did. My loyalty was unconditional. I see now that I had mistaken her acceptance of my support for reciprocation. As we navigated our 20s, a subtle shift occurred. I found my passion in marketing, slowly and methodically building a freelance career from the ground up. My work was often behind the scenes, developing strategies, analyzing data, advising executives. It wasn't flashy, but it was substantial, and I was proud of the reputation I was building. Chloe, meanwhile, found her calling in the world of social media influencers. Her job was to be seen. Her life became a carefully curated feed of brunches, brand events, and borrowed designer clothes. Her professional success was measured in likes and followers, her personal worth tied to the aesthetic she projected. And somewhere along the way, the projection became more important than the reality. Our conversations began to change. When I'd share a professional victory, landing a big client, successfully launching a campaign, her congratulations always felt a little strained, quickly followed by a story about a celebrity she'd met or a free product she'd received. She started making little comments that seemed innocuous at the time, but now, in hindsight, were dripping with a strange mix of pity and condescension. "Oh, you're working all weekend again, sweetie," she'd say, her voice laced with faux sympathy. "You have to let me take you out for a real spa day soon. My treat, of course." Her interest in my finances became more pointed. She knew I was doing well, but the fact that my success wasn't performative seemed to bother her. I didn't have a flashy Instagram feed or a designer handbag collection. I invested my money, saved for a down payment on a future home, and chose to live modestly. To Chloe, a life that wasn't being broadcast wasn't really being lived. My quiet competence was an affront to her loud, curated existence. She couldn't understand why I wasn't flaunting my success, which made her suspect I didn't really have any. The Belize trip was the perfect storm. It was expensive, exclusive, and most importantly, incredibly photogenic. It was a status symbol, a declaration to the world that they had arrived. My request for a 3-day delay on the deposit was not just a logistical hiccup for her, it was a crack in the perfect facade she was trying to build. It suggested that one of her inner circle wasn't living up to the brand, and for Chloe, brand was everything. Looking back, I could see how she had groomed the group for this moment. She'd subtly positioned Mark and Jessica against me for months. "I'm worried about Brenda," I'd heard her tell Jessica once when she thought I was out of earshot. "She works so hard, but she never seems to have any fun. It's like she doesn't know how to enjoy her money." She was framing my financial prudence as a character flaw. Mark, who was always trying to impress Chloe, and Jessica, who was terrified of being on the outs with the group, were easy to sway. They absorbed Chloe's narrative without question. By the time I asked for that extension, the jury was already convinced. I wasn't one of them anymore. I was a project, a problem, a downer. Kicking me out was a mercy killing in their minds. They were protecting the vibe. Their precious, expensive, and utterly fragile vibe. For 2 weeks, I lived in a self-imposed exile. I worked with a ferocity that bordered on obsession, channeling every ounce of my hurt and anger into my projects. I delivered the tech startup's presentation, and they were so impressed they paid my invoice immediately, along with a hefty bonus for the quick turnaround. The $500 that had cost me my friendships was now sitting in my account, a bitter and ironic reminder of the whole affair. I transferred it to my savings account and didn't look back. I was finalizing a quarterly report for my longest-standing client when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The area code was international. I hesitated, then answered, my professional instincts taking over. "Am I speaking with Brenda Adams?" a man's voice asked. It was tight with stress. "This is she," I replied. "Ms. Adams, my name is Arthur Vance. I'm the general manager at the New Solera Reserve in Belize. I believe you work with our parent company, Oceanic Luxury Group." My heart skipped a beat. Solera Reserve. It was the exact resort. I had pitched the initial branding strategy for it 18 months ago, but it had since been handed off to an internal team for the launch. "Yes, I do," I said, my voice steady despite the sudden tea. Remore in my hands. "How can I help you, Mr. Vance?" "Ms. Adams," he said, and the dam of his professional composure broke. "We have a catastrophe on our hands." He explained the situation in a frantic rush. The resort's grand opening press event was in 10 days. They had flown in a dozen high-profile travel journalists and influencers, but the on-site marketing campaign, managed by the junior team, was a disaster. The messaging was inconsistent, the events were poorly planned, and the whole multi-million-dollar launch was on the verge of becoming a public relations nightmare for the brand. He had called the corporate office in a panic, and my name was the one they gave him. "They said if anyone could fix this, it was you," he finished, his voice pleading. The universe, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. "We need you here, Ms. Adams, on the ground. We'll cover everything, of course. First-class flight, all expenses, whatever you need. Can you come tomorrow?" A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had genuinely smiled in 2 weeks. The hurt that had been a constant weight in my chest began to feel lighter. This was more than a job, it was a sign. My passive mourning was officially over. The time for action had arrived. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice cool and confident, "send me the flight details, I'll be there." The moment I hung up, I felt a paradigm shift inside me. I was no longer the victim. I was the expert, the fixer, the one they called when everything fell apart. While Chloe and her followers were planning their outfits, I was being flown in to save the very place they were paying to visit. My investigation began on the flight. Arthur had emailed me the entire failed marketing plan, and I dissected it with ruthless efficiency. The errors were amateurish and glaring. The junior team had focused entirely on aesthetics, the look of the resort, without telling a story. They had ignored the local culture, the unique ecology of the island, the very soul of the place. They were selling a pretty picture, not an experience. It was a campaign Chloe would have loved. By the time the plane touched down on the tarmac in Belize City, I had a new strategy outlined. I knew exactly what to do. The leverage I held was not some hidden secret or a clever trap in the traditional sense. It was my mind. It was my expertise. They had kicked me out for lacking a few $100s, completely oblivious to the fact that my professional value was worth more than their entire vacation combined. As the small hopper plane made its final approach to the island, I looked down at the turquoise water and the stretch of pristine white sand that housed the Solera Reserve. A sense of calm resolve settled over me. I wasn't here for revenge. Not really. I was here to do my job, but if doing my job brilliantly resulted in a little poetic justice, I wasn't going to complain. I was met at the island's tiny airstrip by Arthur Vance himself. He was a man in his 50s with a kind, exhausted face, and the relief that washed over him upon seeing me was palpable. "Ms. Adams, Brenda, thank you for coming," he said, shaking my hand like I was a surgeon arriving to perform a life-saving operation. The confrontation wasn't with a person, but with the problem. Arthur escorted me to a conference room where the beleaguered junior marketing team was assembled. They were all in their early 20s, looking terrified and defeated. They watched me with wide, nervous eyes as I walked in, the seasoned professional flown in to clean up their mess. I felt a brief pang of sympathy for them, but my focus was sharp. Instead of berating them, I started with a simple question. "Forget the marketing plan for a moment," I said, my tone collaborative, not accusatory. "Tell me what you love about this place, not the resort, the island." After a moment of stunned silence, one young woman hesitantly spoke up about the local fisherman she'd met, who told her stories about the constellations. Another talked about the tiny, bioluminescent fungi that grew in the jungle paths and glowed at night. They started talking, their passion for the location finally overriding their fear of my authority. This was the core of my new strategy. I spent the next 2 days in a whirlwind of activity, not holed up in an office, but out on the island. I had them scrap the entire generic "live in luxury" campaign. Our new focus was discover the soul of Solera. I arranged for the visiting journalists to go on guided night walks to see the glowing fungi. I had the head chef redesign the menu around the local fisherman's daily catch and invited him to speak at the welcome dinner. We changed the bland, corporate-sponsored gift bags to include hand-woven baskets from a nearby village. I was revealing the resort's true identity, which they had failed to see. With every change, I could feel the energy shifting. The staff became more engaged, the journalists more intrigued. Arthur watched me with a look of undisguised awe. On the third day, he found me on the main terrace, overseeing the setup for the press dinner. "Brenda," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've done it. You've saved us. The buzz from the journalists is already incredible. They're calling it the most authentic luxury experience they've ever had." I simply smiled. "It was always here, Arthur. You just had to know where to look." That evening, after the triumphant dinner, Arthur approached me again. "The owner, Mr. Sterling, has been watching our progress from afar. He is ecstatic. He wants to thank you personally. He's insisted that you stay for the rest of the week on us as our guest of honor." "That's very generous, Arthur, but I should probably get back," I started to say. "He was very insistent," Arthur pressed, a twinkle in his eye. "And he wants to make sure you have the proper accommodations. He's had us clear out the penthouse suite for you. It's called the Celestial Suite. It has a private rooftop pool, a personal butler, and the best view on the island. It's yours for the next 5 days." My breath caught in my throat. The Celestial Suite. I knew it from the initial branding documents. It was the resort's crown jewel, an opulent, sprawling space usually reserved for royalty and A-list celebrities. It was the stuff of fantasy. And it was going to be mine. The timing was almost too perfect to be believed. I did a quick mental calculation. Chloe, Mark, and Jessica were due to arrive in 2 days. They would have booked the standard garden view rooms, the cheapest option, but still expensive enough to feel exclusive to them. They would be giddy with self-satisfaction, convinced they were living the pinnacle of luxury. I thought about their smug messages, their pity, their condescending offer of a cheap brunch. I thought of Chloe screenshotting my private plea for a little grace. The hurt was still there, but it was now joined by a powerful, exhilarating sense of karmic alignment. I had my location, I had my platform, and now I had my stage, the most magnificent stage I could have ever imagined. The final pieces of the plan were clicking into place, not through my own scheming, but through the simple, undeniable power of my own competence. "Arthur," I said, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across my face. "On behalf of Mr. Sterling, I'd be honored to accept." The next 2 days were a surreal dream. My work was done. The press event was a resounding success, and the junior team, now energized and confident under my guidance, was handling the rest of the week's events. I was, for the first time in years, truly on vacation, but this was no ordinary vacation. My butler, a wonderfully kind and discreet man named Matteo, gave me a tour of the Celestial Suite. It was larger than my entire apartment. A sprawling living area with floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a massive terrace. A spiral staircase led up to a private rooftop deck with an infinity pool that seemed to melt into the Caribbean Sea. The bedroom had a canopy bed so large it felt like its own island. And the bathroom was a marble sanctuary with a rainfall shower and a tub overlooking the ocean. I spent the first day in a state of quiet disbelief, swimming in my private pool, reading a novel on a sun lounger, and allowing Mateo to bring me fresh mango smoothies and perfectly crisp plantain chips. There was no desperate struggle to document every moment, no pressure to perform happiness for an online audience. There was just peace, a profound, luxurious peace that felt more valuable than the suite itself. As the second day dawned, the day of my former friend's arrival, I began to build my case. This wasn't about digging up dirt or exposing a fraud in the legal sense. It was about crafting a single, perfect image that would serve as irrefutable proof. Proof that they had underestimated me, misjudged me, and discarded me based on a snapshot of my life that was not only temporary, but also completely irrelevant to my true worth. I thought about what they would be doing. I knew their flight schedule. They would land around noon, take the ferry, and arrive at the resort's check-in desk around 3:00 p.m. They would be tired, flushed with excitement, and eager to start their perfectly curated trip. They would, of course, be glued to their phones, ready to announce their arrival to the world. That was my window. I decided against a simple selfie. That felt too direct, too boastful. It needed to be elegant, effortless. A picture of a life they couldn't even fathom, let alone afford. At 2:45 p.m., I made my move. I put on a simple, chic white sundress. I didn't bother with much makeup, just a touch of mascara and some lip balm. I let my hair air dry in the sea breeze. Then, I asked Mateo for one final thing. "Mateo, could you please bring a bottle of the best champagne we have up to the rooftop pool?" "Ked, and would you mind taking a photo for me? Just one." He returned moments later with a silver ice bucket holding a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes. I stood at the edge of the infinity pool, my back mostly to the camera, looking out at the endless expanse of turquoise water. The angle was perfect. It captured the stunning view, the private pool, the corner of the luxurious rooftop lounge area, and me, looking serene and completely at home. Mateo, a man accustomed to the whims of the wealthy, had a surprisingly artistic eye. He took the photo on my phone. It was perfect. I looked like I belonged there, not like a tourist who had saved up for a year, but like someone who lived this life. I thanked him profusely and then sat down on a lounger, champagne flute in hand. I opened my social media app for the first time in weeks. I uploaded the photo. For the caption, I kept it simple. I tagged the location, the Celestial Suite Solera Reserve, and then I added a single sentence. Sometimes the most unexpected work trips turn into the most unforgettable escapes. So grateful for the incredible hospitality. It was subtle, it was professional, it was devastating. I checked the time. It was 2:59 p.m. I hit post. And then, with a deep sense of calm, I put my phone on silent, placed it face down on the table beside me, and took a long, slow sip of champagne. The case was built. The evidence was submitted. Now, all I had to do was wait for the verdict to be delivered 300 feet below me, in the resort's main lobby. Down in the grand, open-air lobby of the Solera Reserve, Chloe, Mark, and Jessica were practically vibrating with excitement. Their journey had been long, and they were flushed from the tropical heat, but their spirits were soaring. They had made it. They were here, at the most exclusive resort they had ever been to, ready to spend a week living a life they had only ever seen on Instagram. "I cannot wait to get to the pool," Jessica said, fanning herself with her passport. "I need a cocktail in my hand immediately." "Just wait until everyone sees our posts," Chloe said with a smug smile, already composing a caption in her head. She glanced around the lobby, her eyes scanning the other guests, subtly cataloging their outfits, their luggage, their perceived level of wealth. This was her element. "Finally," Mark said, as they reached the front of the check-in line. "Hello," he said to the receptionist, his voice brimming with self-importance. "We have a reservation. 3 garden view rooms under the name Chloe Peters. As the receptionist tapped at her computer, Chloe pulled out her phone, a reflex ingrained in her from years of documenting her life. She opened her social media feed, ready to craft their grand arrival announcement. And that's when she saw it. The photo was the first thing in her feed. The algorithm, knowing her interest in Brenda, had served it up instantly. She froze, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her smile faltered. "What is it?" Jessica asked, noticing the change in her expression. Chloe didn't answer. She just stared at the picture. The turquoise water, the private rooftop pool, the bottle of champagne. And Brenda, looking serene and beautiful, in a suite that Chloe knew from her obsessive research was the legendary Celestial Suite. The caption burned itself into her brain. Unexpected work trip. Grateful for the hospitality. "No," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. "No way." "No way what?" Mark said, leaning over to look at her screen. His jaw went slack. "Is that Brenda? Where is she?" "She's here," Chloe hissed, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. "She's at this resort, right now." Just then, their phones buzzed in unison. The notification. Mark and Jessica pulled out their own phones, and their faces mirrored Chloe's shock. The triumphant energy that had filled the air around them just moments before vanished, replaced by a thick, suffocating cloud of confusion and envy. The receptionist looked up, smiling politely. "All right, Mr. Peters, we have your 3 garden view rooms ready for you. They're in the hibiscus wing, just past the main restaurant." The words garden view landed like a punch to the gut. Garden view, while Brenda was apparently living in the sky. Chloe's carefully constructed vacation fantasy shattered into a million pieces. The public showdown she had unknowingly walked into was not one of shouting or accusations, but of silent, digital humiliation. Here she was, standing at the check-in counter, feeling like the most important person in the world, only to be instantly dwarfed by the quiet, elegant success of the very person she had cast out and pitied. "How," Jessica stammered, looking from her phone to Chloe's horrified face. "How is this possible? You said she couldn't even afford the deposit." "I don't know," Chloe snapped, her voice high and tight. The public setting, the smiling reception. The other guests milling about, it all trapped her. She couldn't have the meltdown she so desperately wanted. She had to stand there and absorb the full force of her own miscalculation. She, the curator of cool, the arbiter of status, had been completely and utterly outplayed. Mark, ever the follower, just kept staring at the photo. "Is that a private butler?" he mumbled, his own excitement for their garden view room shriveling into dust. Up in the Celestial Suite, I had no idea of the precise drama unfolding below. I just knew the silence on my phone was profound. I took another sip of champagne, the tiny bubbles dancing on my tongue. I looked out at the horizon, where the sky met the sea in a seamless, perfect line of blue. For the first time, I felt the full, exhilarating power of my own quiet strength. The showdown had happened, and I had won without ever having to fire a shot. The first message arrived at 3:15 p.m. It was from Chloe. A single, frantic question mark. I looked at it, then set my phone back down. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again. The dam had broken. "Chloe, where are you?" "Chloe, how did you get here?" "Chloe, Brenda, answer me. This isn't funny." Then came the messages from Jessica and Mark, a chorus of confusion and accusation. "Jessica, is this some kind of joke?" "Mark, seriously, what's going on? Chloe is freaking out." Their dream vacation, the one they had protected so fiercely from my bad vibe, was ruined before it had even begun. I could picture them in their perfectly adequate, but now painfully mediocre, garden view rooms. The jealousy and resentment would be a toxic fog in the air between them. Every moment of their trip would be tainted. Every photo they took a pale imitation of the one I had posted. They wouldn't be able to relax on the main beach without wondering if I was watching them from my celestial perch. I let them stew. I finished my glass of champagne, took a long swim in my rooftop pool, and ordered a magnificent dinner of grilled lobster from room service, which I ate on my terrace under a blanket of stars. I had muted their individual chats, but I hadn't blocked them. Part of me wanted a record of their meltdown. The tone of their messages shifted throughout the evening, moving through the stages of grief. First came denial and anger, then attempts at bargaining. "Chloe, okay, I get it, you're mad, but you have to tell us how you pulled this off. Did you win the lottery? Did you meet some rich guy?" The insinuation was as predictable as it was insulting. It never occurred to them that I could have achieved this on my own merit. In their world, a woman's access to luxury on this scale had to be facilitated by a man or by luck, never by her own intellect and hard work. Finally, late that night, a new message from Chloe appeared. It was long, a rambling paragraph of self-serving apology. "Chloe, Brenda, I'm sorry. I was just trying to protect the trip. I never thought, I didn't know you were doing so well. You never say anything. If you had just told us you were a big-shot consultant for the hotel, we never would have, well anyway. We feel really stupid. Can we just talk? Maybe we can come up and see your suite. We can put this all behind us." I read the message and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a profound sense of distance. She wasn't sorry for hurting me. She was sorry she'd been wrong about my status. She was sorry she had bet on the wrong horse. Her apology was a transaction, an attempt to regain access to the power and prestige she now associated with me. I typed out my one and only reply. "There is nothing to talk about, Chloe. The group made a decision. It's done. Please enjoy your vacation." I used her own words, the same cold, clinical dismissal she had used on me. Then I blocked her number. I blocked Mark. I blocked Jessica. I scrubbed the last vestiges of their toxic influence from my life. The rest of my week at the Solera Reserve was blissful. I explored the island, made friends with the local artisans, and had long, fascinating conversations with Arthur and the hotel staff. I felt a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with money or status, but with mutual respect and genuine connection. I was not a tourist. I was a partner in their success. I never saw Chloe, Mark, or Jessica. I imagine they avoided the main areas of the resort, their shame keeping them in the shadows. Their perfect, Instagrammable vacation had become a private prison of their own making. When I flew home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The pain of the betrayal had been cauterized, leaving behind a clean, strong scar. I had been judged and discarded, but I had refused to accept their verdict. Instead, I had allowed my own life, my own work, and my own worth to speak for themselves. The resolution wasn't in their apology or their regret. It was in my own quiet, unshakable peace. I had outgrown them, and in doing so, finally, truly, checked into a life of my own making.